all of you fellow Floyd Fantastic Colors viewers, and welcome back to a new video on Floyd's Fantastic Colors. Today is different. It's not going to be a traditional review. Today is the first discussion video of the channel, and I find that kind of cool that now there's something different on the channel than just a traditional review. And today, the review is going to be on the worst things to happen in a Colors diecast collector's collection. And by the way, this video took a long time to make, so I hope that you enjoy. Now, let's get into the 10 worst nightmares you don't want to happen in your Colors collection. Oh God, Slider, are you okay? Yeah, he seems okay. Alright, now let's get into number 10. Chipped colors. Having chipped colors is something very common. Something probably many of you collectors who are watching have experienced. Whether it's with colors falling off shelves and falling on the floor or against other colors, or maybe just if you started collecting when you were younger, like I did, and you just can't resist playing with them. And over time, they get a little worn out, and like Slider here, his spoiler is very, very chipped up. And he does have some other chips and scratches around. So yeah, that happened to him over time. And sometimes, when they keep on falling off shelves like the Trunk Fresh Pity, you can get really awfully looking chips like this. Yeah. He fell down like this once. Oh God, I'm starting to chip him myself. Alright, I think both of them are fine. And other results of just another car running into him resulted in this. Yeah. Almost half of the number 3 on his 35 is missing. That's an issue with Thailand colors. So moving on to number 9, which is AXELS. So this is also something very common to happen to colors from years and years of usage, like all of these, who I all got when I was about 6 or 7. Now I'm 10, so yeah, they've been with me for over 4 years now. So they're kind of special to me. And from years and years of playing with and usage, they've gotten very worn out. Like, my previous king is barely even standing up. And don't worry, I have a new king. I have many kings, which I will talk about later in the video in another segment. And Bobby Swift has a AXEL too, like here, and a little bit on the other side. And so does Murray. So if you started collecting cards when you were a kid, this probably has happened to you. Or maybe if you keep your cards on the floor and if something falls on them, this might happen. Or maybe if you accidentally step on one, that might also happen. So yeah, it's a little worse than chip cards, but definitely not that bad compared to some of the other segments in the video. So now moving on to number 8, car organizing. So at first you might not know what I actually mean by this. Organizing cars, to some of you watching, might mean, oh, just putting them in order for a movie. How was that bad? Or putting them in order from like character, or if they're racers like I do, I put them in order from number. How was that bad? Well, what I mean by this is, well, I have a ton of Lightning McQueen diecasts, and this is not all of them. I still have many more. So, yeah. And what I mean is that, for example, if you get a new variant, for example, recently I customized this very beat up race damaged Lightning McQueen, and I had to basically reorganize my entire Radiator Springs shelf because there were so many McQueens and so many Maters and so many Ramones and random Radiator Springs townies, and there was just so many of them, so I needed to spend a whole lot of time reorganizing that entire shelf just to fit one McQueen. Yeah, so that's what I mean by this. This might not have happened to you, but in case you have empty spaces in your shelves, that'll be a little insane. So moving on to the next segment, which is chipped mini racers. Alright, so chipped mini racers might not happen that much to you, but it does for me. My mini racers have been slipping off my shelves very often, and it's extremely annoying. And you might think, oh, why? It's basically just the same thing as chipped cars, which was literally number 1. Shouldn't you have mentioned this for honorable mentions? Like, for chipped cars, I mean, that's not that bad. But chipped mini racers is much worse. Number 1, they're made in Thailand, so Thailand has this very odd trend of making extremely glossy cars. And when the mini racers get chipped, they're small, and the chips are still regularly sized. So you might not be able to see this that well, but yeah, that happened to Dr. Damage once. And in case you want a better view, here's Tim Treadless, who has 4 chips all on his hood just by falling off. And Metallic Ramon, who's also pretty bad. Even worse than the first 2 because his chips are silver. Not like white where you can't really see it from far away. Plus Dr. Damage is a demolition derby racer, so it doesn't matter as much as with some other racers. Because like in the demolition derby, by crashing, that'll probably happen. So moving on to the next segment, which is when you miss out on a corrected re-release. This has happened to me many times in the past, where I just pass up on old releases. Like, for example, when I was in first grade and I was only 7, I failed to realize that the Terry car gas I found in the store, like that I found at Target, was not the original one. I did not realize this, but Terry car gas, if you have his original release, is an inaccurate model. He really should be the Brick Yardley model, not the Cal Weathers model. For example, the Brick Yardley model looks like this. It is a little different than the Cal Weathers model. This is Brick Yardley, and that's the model to Cal Weathers. like basically the same model as Cal Weathers. And it makes sense that he should have been the Brickyardly model, because unlike some of the other racers in Cars 3 who actually made a return and like spanned generations and still were racing in Cars 3, like Murray Clutchburn or Floyd Mulvihill and Todd Marcus, and also Ernie Gearson. Like, they went to Cars 3, basically. They didn't stop racing in Cars 1. Like, somewhere in between Cars 1 and Cars 3, some of the racers retired and got replaced by new ones. Like, for example, these two. And James Clean Air got replaced too. Unlike that, some of the other racers like Ponchi Wipeout did not, and were this model. And this will be a segment later in the video of having them, like, this will be a segment later in the video, but since I don't want to spoil the number one reason, I'm leaving it for later. So, my parents wanted to sell, like, my dad wanted to sell this multi-pack because none of the cars inside were duplicates, but the Ponchi Wipeout was a corrected version. And while we thought, well, we don't want to have 11 duplicate cars just for a different eyelid Ponchi Wipeout. Also, by the way, he has this very huge chip. I should have really featured him in the chip cars. But anyways, yeah, that's happened before where I miss out on some other corrected re-releases, and I missed out on his single release, like with Blue Desert. So, moving on to the next segment, Cars with Foil. Many of you might not know what I mean, also like with the car organization. But in this case, you'll probably think I'm going crazy because what do you have against Cars with Foil, Floyd? I know these are in probably like my top 10 favorite cars, like my favorite next gens ever. Conrad Camber and Aaron Clocker are my two favorites, actually. But with some of the China releases, and yeah, I somehow managed to get a China Aaron Clocker in 2021. But luckily his Thailand release doesn't have this problem, neither does Chase. But the problem with the cars with foil, this might happen to many of you fellow collectors out there who have had their cars, like who might have played with their cars when they were younger, like I did. I got Steve when I was 7, and over time the foil wears off and sometimes comes off over time. And since I actually got Aaron Clocker on eBay, he was already worn out from his previous owner. So unless you're Disney Docket or some of you other pro cars collectors out there, this will almost definitely happen to you if you have any of these cars. Also, I needed to get an extra Chase bracelet because my previous one, the foil kept falling off. Then my mom had the idea to put nail polish on it to try to avoid that. But then that basically just faded it and changed it to like a terrible color. not anything close to emerald. So all of these are very great die casts. Like, all of them are great. But China, you might want, like, if China were still making cars, I would really want them to correct this issue of the foil on cars. Luckily, this hasn't happened to Conrad, though. I keep him very safe since he is my number one favorite next gen. And I'm trying to do the rest. I'm trying to do that with the rest of these guys. So anyways, moving on to the next segment. Multi-pack extras. So multi-pack extras. Many of you will be able to relate to this one. This basically means when you get a new multi-pack with a new release. For example, I got the Conrad Camber multi-pack with him in the multi-pack. And it also came with some other cars that I didn't have, like Bruce Miller or Dan Garcia. And I was actually getting for the first time. Same thing with Conrad. So I did get that multi-pack. But of course, like always, there needs to be a McQueen or a Jackson or maybe even a Danny. Like a Danny Suarez, who has gotten so many multi-pack releases. He's basically became like way too overrated in terms of die-cast releases. Not only is he based off of an actual NASCAR driver, on top of that, always shown in second place next to Jackson Storm, except for that time when he just wanted to be next to the leagueless racer for some odd reason. Yeah. He's always shown next to Jackson Storm. Even one time in front of him. And is basically in every single old multi-pack. And I've ended up with a lot of him. But the three main cars I've had way too many of is Rusty's Lightning McQueen's, Jackson Storms, and Kings. Also, by the way, my corrected variant King, or like the special one with like the line around the windshield, is basically my only King that's still in good shape. Yeah, there's beaten up Ben Axel King from earlier. For example, in multi-packs like this, you're gonna end up with some extras. Or in this case, a lot of extras. I got this in early 2022, and the only reason why I'm not reviewing this is because the only reason I got this was because of Brad Windmiller. So that's the only reason why I got this, but then I realized at the last minute, when I was basically right about to review this, that he was getting a 2022 re-release, but I have not even found his re-release yet. Yeah, that's a problem. The rest of these are literally all extras that I have already gotten before. So, that's what I mean. So now, on to the next segment. Broken cars. These might all seem like regular cars to you until this happens. Come on. Yeah, that happened. This is even worse. As you can see, I'm still working on this, but it's going to become a damaged Kevin Racing Tire custom. And how did this happen? Okay. Yeah. When I when I was 7, yeah, when I was in first grade, basically, I was very interested into cars, especially Cars 1 racers. And one time I was carrying Kevin Racing Tire upstairs and dropped him just about, not that high. And then when he fell, he split in half. And at first I was crying, I was sad that he broke. And then I realized he could be fixed. So then I put him together and realized it was actually holding. So I just took out his back wheels. I saved them and to this day I still have them saved in a precious spot. And I'm turning him into a damaged custom since his back wheels are missing. And for flipped over, this one isn't really that bad as the other two, but since he is the second rarest next gen, a China flipped over, and this happened when he fell off the shelf. Yeah, that was a pretty awful moment. So now, this was number 2. Now we are moving into the honorable mentions. So this might not really look like honorable mentions to you. This just looks insane. Yeah, a huge blue dog with a racetrack drawing on it, with a racetrack drawing, three no mini boxes, and these creepy nightmare-inducing lenticulars. Yeah, so what does this mean? This basically means not getting the right mini racer, where you try several, Alright, so before I knew that website that tells you the codes to all of the mini racers, I had to just guess what number was the right mini racer to get. So that left me with many duplicate mini racers. And I sort of just had to avoid them for a little bit because I didn't want to end up with so many useless cardboard and so many useless mini racers that don't have any purpose than to just sit on my shelf catching dust and making my allergies get worse. So yeah, that's what that means. Basically just not knowing the codes to them and having to avoid them because you don't want to end up with many duplicates like this. And what does this stand for? That means dog plus diorama. So I told you in my Royce Revsley video that I was working on a racetrack diorama in that 4 months of absence. And I was still working on it. And in the 1 month of absence, in the 1 month and a half absence that I had between Royce Revsley and this video, I was still working on the racetrack and some keychain craze that will be coming soon. And yeah, so this is how it's gonna look once it's all done. And it's still not done for some reason. And this basically means when your dog meets a diorama. This hasn't really happened to me because my new dog, Tucker, we basically just put a gate in the hallway of my house so that he doesn't go upstairs and choose my cards collection and goes into my racetrack and goes into the room where my racetrack is and ruins all of the work I put into it. But it did happen a little bit when my smaller dog, Coffee Bean, who is 8 years old, so she's pretty calm, unlike Tucker, who's 4 months and runs around everything, chews cardboard, which would be a very awful sign for this. And she basically stepped on the walls and ruined some of the cars. It wasn't that bad, but it can get much worse if an unexpected dog comes near and ruins it. And lenticulars. These are very famous cars in the Cars collection. These nightmare-inducing die-cast were released in 2010. Like, the entire year of 2010, these awful, awful cars were released. I mean, if I were this age in 2010, basically now I will be 22, but if I were the age I am now in 2010, I would worry that for the rest of my life, I would have to live with these things staring at me. It was meant to be a genius idea. Whoever created it, that was genius, to have the eyes move of the cars. But whoever manufactured it, oh God, oh my goodness, who would ever make such terrible, creepy things where it makes cars look like they have 3 eyes or 4 eyes, depending on the way you look at them? It was just awful that someone in the world could be so awful at making cars that they create these. Now, before we get to number 1, this really should have gone with the broken car segment, but I thought it was too big of a surprise to be with one other segment. This treasure needed its own segment. So what lurks inside of here, once I remove all of these knockoff cars, there's something hiding underneath. Something that you will not believe how this happened. There's a bunch of broken stuff in here and just knockoff cars. And once you get to the bottom, you'll realize this has happened to a very, very unfortunate extra of Aiken Axler that I had. I was just organizing my cars and this guy was on the shelf and I just bumped into the shelf that he was on and that made him fall off, literally just bumping against a plastic old toy that I had when I was young and bouncing onto the carpet, afterwards plummeting to his death. Luckily I have another Aiken Axler, but if this was my only one, that would be awful. Now let's try to put this guy back together, if we can even do that, because of how many pieces this guy is in. I mean, there's even some missing pieces. I don't even know where this previously went. I guess that went here. Yeah, it did. So yeah, now we have this very low budget put together Aiken Axler. And yep, he has a bunch of chips too. Yeah, so as you can see, just by touching him with a pen, he disintegrates. Even a piece of a spoiler's missing. Yeah, so now once I clean up this mess, you'll be able to see the real #1 worst nightmare for a Cars collector. Now, the real nightmare for Cars collectors. The worst thing to happen to your Cars collection. Well, not really affecting your cars themselves, more affecting you as a collector. Being a young Cars collector. This means that when your friends come over, that means they might want to play with your cars and touch your racetrack and crash them, leading to chipped cars and bent axles. They might want to bring your cars outside and throw them down the slide, and maybe they'll fall in some poop like what happened to Ed Trunken once. Luckily he got washed. And some other stuff means parents not wanting to get a car you need. For example, this was what I kept wanting to say with Paunchy Wipeout. My parents didn't want me to unbox an entire 11 duplicate cars just for one Paunchy Wipeout with different islands. I'm still trying to get his Thailand re-release. Hopefully that'll come soon. And your parents might say that car is way too expensive, forcing me to make a clay race damaged Chuck Armstrong because of how rare he is, and his wheels literally fell off like a year ago, and it looked awful. Those very low budget wheels I made for him. But other than that, I mean, it looks kind of good. Like, the mood springs looks good. But other than that, it looks a little awful with that awful cardboard base I made for him. Or forcing me to turn the King that my cousins gave me, that was already a little broken up and scratched very much, into a damaged King, which is a little way too damaged. But luckily I managed to get his re-release on my birthday, and I need to reach over to that. I hope I don't make a face reveal. Good. Yeah, and that's probably not gonna come soon, so don't get your hopes up. Yeah, so I will review this very soon. The Damaged King diecast. I got this for my birthday. So yeah, now you won't have to face this monstrosity anymore. I mean, it is a good custom, but the damage is way too bad. Like, he shouldn't actually be that damaged. He should just be a little muddy and a little dented up. And something that's been happening very recently, when your parents are too busy and can't make a review at the moment. Other collectors, like many of you teenager Cars collectors who are like 18 or 20 or 19, maybe 17 or 16, can just make a review whenever you want to. If I was that age, I would probably make reviews about every day, so you wouldn't have to wait an entire month for every one of my reviews to come out. Yeah, so that's been happening very recently. And that's basically the worst thing, in my opinion, to happen to a cards collector if you're young. Or if you're young, you just want to play with your cards and don't even care about opening a wrecked Chuck Armstrong on camera. You just want to open it and crash it some more. Yeah, so anyways, what do you think about this tier list? Wait, not tier list. Basically, just discussion of the worst nightmare in a cards diecast collector's collection. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think any of the honorable mentions things should have gone in the actual list? Do you think that any of my actual reasons are a little too far-fetched, or maybe a little, like maybe they should be a little higher on the list? Do you think any of my honorable mentions should have been on the list? If you do, you should comment on the video telling me so I can hear your opinion, or like read your opinion. So anyways, I hope you like this video. Make sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. And bye now.